Before we start working with audio, I'm just going to show you a couple of ways again, just to make sure that we know how to import different samples and different audio. So assuming that we're not working with any instruments, we're just working with pre-made samples or elements that we can import. So if you come over to the loops, which is also O, and we select, let's just filter this down using our instruments. We're going to find a piano. So just simply drop it onto the project. What you will notice is that it is got this little follow tempo. So if we change the tempo, you can see that the region stays the same length. If I turn that off, change the tempo, you can see that it alters. So I'm going to click Alt and drag. I'm going to highlight it again, click Alt and drag. So I now have 4 versions of this. Alternatively, I could loop, or I could press Command and R. And I'm going to highlight all of them and hit U, and that sets the locators. So a different way to import audio, if we create a new audio channel, and I'm going to navigate to my Finder window. This is where I've got my samples in a nice folder, all organized, and I would just click and drag and drop from here, and then I could start to work with it within the project. So with this one, for example, it's a riser, so I'm just going to trim the beginning of it, and I'm going to position it onto the grid. So before I do that, I'm going to go to snap and snap to absolute value. What that means is when you slide a region, it will actually snap to the lines. Like that. Not quite the right pitch, but we can see how that's working. So a little side note then, if it isn't the right pitch, we could also come to pitch shifter, and then we could try and find the right note that this will play at. That's maybe better. So now these 2 files that we've imported into the project, if we come up to this button here, now this is all of the audio files that have been imported into the project or recorded into the project. The top name is the file. There is only one instance of this file in the project. The little metronome symbol here is linked to the follow tempo. So you know that this is basically an Apple loop that will be able to be manipulated by tempo. The difference with this electro riser doesn't have the metronome, and when we change the tempo of the project, you can see that it always changes. So if we open these out, what we're seeing here, this is the initial file. This is the instance of it in the project, and you can see that it's edited. Okay, if we come to here, that is the original file, and then each one of these are the instances that are in the project. And what you'll notice is because I got rid of some earlier on, these ones are not actually there anymore. So we can just go to select unused and delete. Okay, just to tidy up. You can press Alt and click on the arrow and it will close all of them. And this is important to remember because as we're editing a file, we then can be sure that we're not destructively editing. We're not getting rid of that file or altering it. We're only altering the instance of it that is in the project. So if I did this, and then I did this, and we copy that, that's probably not going to sound very good, but there's a little bit of experimentation. If I loop this bit, you can see how things are starting to change to reflect what is being done in the project. Okay, so just going to save this. So now what I've got is just a little bit more of a developed project. So I've got a drum loop. I've got a bass sound which was a MIDI instrument that I have converted into audio. And then I've got some atmosphere sounds and some other kind of bass tones and synthy elements. These are all taken from different sample packs with the exception of the sub. And literally all I've done is balance the volumes and started to position them in a place where they fit the loop. So here it is. Okay, so what I'm going to concentrate on is I'm just going to grab these three first and move them out of the way. So I'm just going to do a little bit of editing. So in these sections here, where we have two sounds that are overlapping each other, I'm going to cut these and I'm going to use my fade so that as one comes in, one comes out, and they kind of move out of each other's way. Now there's quite a few different ways that we could go about this, but in terms of editing, it's quite nice to manipulate sounds like this. And you have quite a lot of control over it, just using my marquee tool click zones and my fade tool click zones. So marquee. Now another way I could do this is I could click on this part, I could hit U, which is going to set the locators pretty much around it. Select this one, go to my toolbar and split by locators. A little bit more long-winded, but it still does the same trick. There's also one here. Now, when we're working with audio, it's important to remember that when we're cutting samples, when we're making when we're making alterations to the sample, we want to just make sure that we don't get any kind of little clips. So if I double click on this so I can see it in the editing window. So this is track, shows me what I have in the track. File shows me the actual file that I'm working with. So here I've cut the beginning. Well, I haven't really cut it. What I've done is I've just trimmed it. Okay. So you can see the part of the audio file that is left over. And now that is representative of the window that is at the bottom of the screen. Now, when we cut audio, and this is a really good example. So when we cut audio, we want to be looking to cut at what's known as a zero crossings point. So if we think of back to our the way that our sound moves, and you have a positive and you have a negative part of the movement, part of the cycle. If you think of this in terms of your speaker cone moving out and in, if we cut the audio when it's not in a neutral position, we get little pops and clicks. So we want to make sure that snap edits to zero crossings, and then what I need to do is just try and alter this so that it actually goes closer to a 0 point, which would be there. It's not the same on both sides, which is a little bit problematic. So it might be better for me to move this. So maybe there. So now we won't get any pops and clicks. We won't get any little artifacts that are added to the sound. Additionally, what I quite like to do is then just add a tiny little fade just to the track, just so that if there is anything, it fades out. And we won't hear that. Now, what I can do here is I can select all those regions together. I can do fade in, say 9 or 10, fade out, I do 10 again, and now each of these have the same fades applied to them. So we might want some of our sounds to go in reverse, just to alter the way that they're being played. So this one, for example, this is the sound normally. It's very kind of dark and has like this echoey timbre to it. But I think it would be better with reverse. So it's simply this little button here, and all it does is it reverses the region that you have selected. So you don't have to have everything on the same channel the same. I just recommend that you have the same sounds on each channel. You know, and if we were to have this one reversed and the other one not, then maybe what I would do is use my color palette and just change the color of one so that I know there's something different about that on the channel. So if we just focus on these drums for a minute. So I'm going to go Control and click, and I'm going to convert loops to regions. So it gives me a region for each part of the loop. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to just, rather than have the same pattern all the way through, I'm going to look at the first 8 bars. And at the end, I'm going to make some little kind of editing variations to it, just so that it's not the same. So essentially making a drum fill out of the parts, out of the drums that are in the loop. So literally just experimenting with this. And because I know that my grid will allow things to snap and the editing functions will make sure it's on the grid, and my loop or the region that I am using is the same tempo as the project, I know that the slices that I'm creating will actually fit. So let's just listen to it from here. So that works. Try another one. So this time we will cut, and highlight this part. I'm going to reverse that bit. Colour it red so I know it's reversed. And then this bit, trim it down and loop it so that we get almost a little roll. Just starting to add some variation so that we don't just have the same drum beat all the time. So another nice way of doing this variation is actually by taking the drums away. So I'm going to get it to stop on a snare, hopefully. Just going to borrow this, so just selected it, copied it over, and I'm going to reverse that. So we've got some variation there. Final thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to layer a little bit of this drum pattern with some additional drums. So go into my samples. I'm just going to choose a drum kit. Going to use that one. So just dragged it in. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to trim it down because it's literally that long. And now, wherever I hear the kick within this part of the pattern, I'm going to place my own kick. Typically I would do this with the kick and the snare, and then start to develop my own pattern and variations mixed in with the editing techniques for creating fills. Obviously they would need to be tidied up where the fills were, just to make sure that they actually fit. So for example here, that one needs to be removed because there's a gap, and this one, they kind of work. But that's a little bit of working with audio, editing audio, and working with some samples.